the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to Talking Catholic. This is your co-host, Mary McCusker, and I'm joined by Mike Walsh. Mike, how's it going?
It's going good. It's, for years, during the summertime, I've been on this podcast and I've talked about, how busy I am and how crazy it's been and I'm pulling my hair out. This has actually been, knock on wood, praise God, a mildly sane summer where I've actually had the ability to relax a little bit. Like, there have not been things going on in the evening.
Really?
I've had weekends where I haven't had to do things. It's been good so far. I haven't taken a proper vacation yet, but that's tentatively scheduled for the middle of August. So we'll be doing some extra recording in there to get around that.
Do you have any plans for vacation? You never actually use your vacation days, though, because every time you do, I know something goes haywire in the diocese and people are calling you, myself included.
It's true.
So you deserve it for sure.
I always bring my gear with me just in case I have to go back into work mode while I'm elsewhere. But my in-laws have a house in the Poconos, so we're going to go to the Poconos for a week.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. We're looking forward to it. It's my brother-in-law and I have a very good relationship, and he keeps buying houses in the Poconos and then calling me to help him rehab them. So I get to flex that muscle a little bit, but then I never really get a chance to enjoy the house. So this year we're going to actually go up and spend a week at the house.
That's awesome. You know what? The Poconos is underrated. Everybody goes to the beach in the summertime, which is awesome. But spending time in the mountains, the quiet, the lakes, it is beautiful there.
I've seen your Instagram. I know how much you enjoy being out in the woods and stuff like that.
The solitude, the quiet. It's really, really a nice area. It's cheap.
It is. It's cheap. It's great to go in the summertime. And for those of us in New Jersey, it's incredibly close to get to. So it's less than 2 hours and I'm away from everything for a little while. And he's right off. He's not on a lake. He's right off a lake. And he's within driving distance of, 10 different things, including several water parks, which my 13-year-old son might enjoy us taking advantage of. So yeah, I'm actually going to take some vacation time. So I'm looking forward to that. But I've also been looking forward to some of the stuff we have coming up in and around the diocese, including on this podcast. I have tentatively 2 Catholic media professionals from, two media professionals who are Catholics who work in the Philadelphia media market, would be a better way of putting it. And they're going to come on they've agreed to come on the podcast. So I'm looking forward to that.
Can you tell us who? Because this is the first time I'm hearing about it.
I'm excited because you're going to be my co-host, I think, for one, if not both of them. So that's going to be exciting.
Being voluntold on the podcast.
Well, you know what it is I still think of you as, even though it's not true, you've been working for the diocese now for like 5 years.
Almost 5, yeah.
Yeah. I still think of you as a young professional. So I'm like, I got to expose her to all this, opportunities to meet other people in other industries and stuff like that. I figured you get a kick out of it.
Oh, I love meeting new people. On a podcast, it can be nerve-wracking.
I know. You get so nervous doing these things. And then we do them and they're great. So for anyone who's wondering,
we'll let the listeners decide on that one.
I love all of my co-hosts, but Mary always has the most unique perspective. So I always enjoy forcing her to be my co-host for episodes that she's completely uncomfortable with, because you never fail. You always have great questions.
I fumble a lot. I can't listen to them ever afterwards because I hear the likes and the ums and I should have asked that question. And I rambled on for too long. Right now.
You come across as very authentic, and we like that.
Wow, you are in a good, relaxed mood today.
Listen, my true nature is to be charitable. I just cover in an incredibly large pile of jaded and angry. But when we can be together, all of us in a nice conversation, I like that. Plus, this is an opportunity for us to also highlight the Catholic Star Herald a little bit.
Yes.
Because in this week's edition, we do a very special retrospective on our now former managing editor, Carl Peters. I really encourage everyone to pick it up. It's Carl worked for the Catholic Star Herald for 32 years. He worked for the diocese for 37 years. He was the managing editor for 26 years, I think. And he's a very he's a very private person. He's a columnist, so you can sort of read his thoughts. But I had him on the podcast once. He could not have been less comfortable because this is just not his thing. So
he works in silence and very humble. And I always forget just how many people don't know who he is. They read his things, but they've never met him before. And he's one of the best people I've ever come to know. So
yeah. And
please read the paper.
Yeah, because it really does. Because he's a humble sort, and he never wanted to be out and in front. And my retirement gift to him was not putting him on the podcast before he left.
He just had 3 parties against right. all wishes to go as quietly as possible.
Yeah, but
it was for us, not for him.
But as a Catholic journalist, he was. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say shy, though that may be accurate. But he was a shy, retiring type, and. But his skills were amazing, with all of the fallout related to Catholic newspapers across the country, and with so many of them shuttering in dioceses all around, including across the river from us. He was able to keep this thing running, and he did it at such a high level with such quality content in very difficult times amongst 5 different bishops.
Right.
And let's face it, you and I have commented on this, where you and I were emotionally aggravated from time to time. He was so calm and so even-keeled and so wonderful that he was an absolute pleasure to work with. And quite frankly, when I joined the diocese almost 6 years ago now, the paper was the one thing I wasn't worried about.
Right.
Because I knew he was there and he was going to be able to help me get accustomed to it.
Personally and professionally. He's just...
Yeah, well read.
It sounds like a eulogy. It sounds like he's still going to be writing for the paper,
yes,
right?
That's right. He's still writing for paper. He has a column, as a matter of fact, in this week's paper, which, did you cry when you read it? Did you tear up? I was hoping you would.
Chopping some onions, maybe.
I read it and I beamed when I read it because it was such a great way of sort of explaining his perspective as a Catholic journalist and the role of the Catholic newspaper, which is different than that of a daily newspaper or a secular newspaper, that it served a different role. And it was, he really summed it up really well. I hope people will appreciate that because, sometimes we get hit for what we put in the paper, what we don't put in the paper.
I can only imagine what Carl's gotten over
the course of 30 years. He may have had 1 or 2 letters, 1 or 2 phone calls. But very rarely have either of us ever been called into the bishop's office for talking to, because we really tried hard to do a great job, and he, I never had to think twice about it. So it's a great section in the newspaper this week that I really, really, really do hope people will read. It'll do a much better job than I am right now of sort of explaining Carl to the listener and to the reader.
And we're happy for him. He
really
was
are.
ready to retire and did his time. And
mid-60s. He was, I think, his first day of retirement. He went out for a long bike ride, and his retirement party. Yes, and his retirement party included many hours at a bar, which is his other favorite thing to do. So that's a good newsman. He
right after mentioning how private he is about his personal life, you go on about his pastimes and activities.
Hey, listen. Many times we had many discussion over a good beverage, and actually it was one of the best retirement gatherings I'd ever been to because it was so joyful and so really wonderful. Was. And for being a private person, he really engendered a lot of joy. So many people came. We have a freelance photographer that just beamed the entire time she was around him, and I know how much that meant to you, just seeing people so happy to be around him and stuff like that. It was great.
They do light up.
They really do. He's a wonderful sort. So we're going to miss him around here from a day-to-day standpoint, but
he's still around. We know. But he's still around,
and yes, he has promised Bishop Sullivan that he will continue to write. So for all of you who are big Carl Peters fans, I promise you, it may not be once a month. It'll be at his discretion, but he will submit columns from time to time, and we'll still be able to read his stuff.
Yes.
So very excited about that. And he's not dying. He's going to be around for a long time.
Well, that's a good segue.
It is a good segue.
Our guest today.
Because while we say goodbye to a beloved member of the family, we bring in who knows, maybe someday will be beloved member of the family. I don't know. We'll see how she does.
Wow. Wow.
The new managing editor of the...
Who you referred to in your email... You know what? He shot me a look. I'm not even going to say it.
I didn't refer to her as anything. But she is a wonderful person, and she's someone
with a great sense of humor.
With a great sense of humor, and somebody that I got to meet a couple of years ago. And when I found out that Carl's position was opening, I said to myself, you know what? That's the kind of person that I would love to see fill Carl's chair. Yeah. So I made a point to reach out to her, and she's someone with a Catholic media background herself. And I felt, you know what? Let me see if she'd either help us to find Carl's replacement, or maybe she might have an interest in joining us. And sure enough, she did. Because, which, you never want the people who want to be there, but I'm going to take a risk on this. Anyway, we have...
Who's our guest, Mike?
Our guest today is Jen Mauro, the new managing editor of the Catholic Star Herald. Jen, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for sitting through 10 minutes of intro.
Yeah, we appreciate that. I was just looking at the timer.
And having to follow all of our love about your former, or our former, managing editor. You okay with that?
Absolutely. Hey, I get it. I worked alongside him for a month, and I wish it could have been longer. That sounds kind of odd to say, but he is already a friend, I hope, and a mentor in a short amount of time to me as well. So
yeah,
and that's always tricky, like starting a new role when everybody's singing the praises about the person there before you. I know that happened with me, and I was just so nervous. But Jen, you've just been awesome. Handled it with grace, and here we're going on about Carl. But it's been so great to work with you. It's only been, what is it, a month?
About a month. But thank you for those words. Thanks.
Yeah.
So how has it been so far? Can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up here?
Sure. Well, I think Mike kind of summed it up there, but
yeah.
Well, that's how she got in the front door. But her career spanned long before she came here. Jen is a true journalist of 20 plus years as a professional.
Yeah.
Where'd you get your start at?
So I went to school. I grew up basically in Arlington, Texas, right between Dallas, Fort Worth, and I went to journalism school in Arlington at a branch of the UT Arlington, University of Texas Arlington, and I actually started for psychology, not journalism, but I had spent my entire childhood working long hours with my grandmother at the kitchen table on grammar. And we would sit together, I mean, really, literally for hours and diagram sentences. And it turned out I was good at writing.
Wow.
And after my first semester in psychology, I met someone who brought me down to the college paper, and that was that. And I went into journalism, which was odd because I was extremely shy and did not want to talk to anybody. Now you can't get me to stop talking. And after graduating, I moved up to upstate New York at my first newspaper, Times-Herald-Record in Middletown, New York, and worked there for 3 years. And then came to New Jersey, where I worked for Gannett for 7 or 8 years. Then I went to Germany. Do you want to hear all this?
Sure.
Oh, yes. Please go on.
Well, hold on. Let's put a pin in Germany for a second. Let's go back to the start. I think it's not that uncommon for journalists to be a bit introverted or have. I mean,
that's a good point.
That's still, for my parents are shocked that I ever became a journalist back in the day, because they knew I never, A, didn't want to talk to anybody, and B, really wasn't interested in asking people's questions, and honestly didn't really have any interest in other people's lives.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that last one, but
different.
We're curious at the very least.
Well, it was something. My grandfather was a reporter. I had several family members who were in schools, and then I had this one guy who was a radio reporter in New York City. Very famous for him up there. I worked for WINS in New York City. It was Paul Parker. And he had always the coolest stories about what he did for a living, covering murders and fires and the mob and all this really cool stuff. And I just kept thinking, that's really cool. I wonder if I've never done anything cool in my life. Maybe instead of being a teacher, I should be a journalist. But I went to school.
Be a murderer. Talking about how cool.
Well, you know what? That would certainly make my life interesting. You're not wrong about that.
Sorry, God.
But you know, but that was the draw of journalism, was, you know, kind of being amongst these cool moments in time. Was that the kind of thing that drew you from psychology to journalism, or what was it that sort of jumped it? Was it just that you loved to write?
I really was just that I loved to write. I loved to read. I would read all the time, and I think I really thought I was going to be an author. And then when I was working for the college newspaper, our advisor was a journalist who he was editing by night, but he would spend a couple hours during the day working with the students at the college newspaper. And I just had so much tremendous respect for him. And then reading his columns as well in the paper, I started becoming more interested in that aspect of it and really telling people stories. So instead of reading stories all the time and writing fiction stories, I got more interested in writing real life stories, people stories. And that a lot of that had to do with, kind of moving away from the... I did what you were saying. Go ahead, cover the fires, cover the car wrecks. But after a while, I thought, let's go beyond that and see what kind of stories I can tell. So, yeah.
No, I believe that. Well, we've sort of, let's say you went to college for what degree?
First medical, and I quickly learned that I couldn't quite handle that. So then I was undeclared. I didn't know what I was doing. I went to St. Joe's. They're known for marketing, so I spent some time in the business school, and something about it, I don't want to knock my alma mater, but there was that human piece to it that I thought was missing. And just like you said, Jen, how you had a professor, it reminds me a lot of my journalism professor who taught a lot and just really had a way of pushing people out of their comfort zones, but in a really good way and in a way that I needed. So I switched over to journalism and started with, interviewing people on campus and then people in West Philly around the area, and then just all sorts of human interest things. And of course I was still really shy then and didn't really know how to ask questions, but you learn, and then I loved it from there.
Journalism is one of those things that's great on the job training, because particularly if you can get in not particularly if you get in someplace green, but I know how green I was because I didn't have any journal. I didn't go to J school at all. I was on the job J school, and I got made fun of a lot in my first job about that I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But I got my job. Here's how I became a journalist. I wanted to write. They hired me as an ad rep. I sold one ad over 6 months, but they let me write 3 times, and that created a portfolio. At the same time, I was a photographer, though. So the next job needed a photographer, and they said, well, we need a photographer, but we'll let you write a little bit, too. And slowly, I became, I'd say 50-50. I did just as much writing as I did photography. But it was the municipal beat was the best beat to have, because you learned how the world really ran. Absolutely. It was like so I went to school to be a history major, and I wanted to teach civics. Well, what I learned covering municipal government and what I taught for the 1 year I was a history teacher were 2 entirely different things about how the world works and how a bill is made and how stuff actually gets done, how potholes get filled. I found it to be fascinating. Did you? I mean, for someone, Jen, who wanted to have this psychology part to you, did you appreciate the sort of like the nuances of humanity in your reporting? Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I also found, kind of what you were speaking about is, Mary, is that I get so nervous interviewing someone at the beginning. Yeah. And then the more I interviewed people, I realized they can't tell that you're nervous. They're actually nervous to be interviewed. Right. And they're not worrying about you. They're worrying about if what they're saying and if what they're saying sounds smart. Mm-hmm. And when I realized the attention's not on me, then it was kind of gloves off, let's do this and let's get in and get dirty, and it can be surprising how people do open up and do want to share, and sometimes it takes earning their trust, but when they do open up and you just like learn this whole other side to them, I mean, that's
just such a great feeling.
I'm always honored when somebody does that.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, I was covering some floods down in Brick, New Jersey. The Parkway had flooded into some homes. I mean, everybody had lost everything. I'm walking into homes that have nothing on the walls. All the furniture is ruined. I'm sure the last thing they wanted to do was talk to me.
Right.
But they did. And, you know, I put my notebook down. You don't have to immediately jump in. I just put my notebook down and asked them some, like, hey, how are you doing questions?
Right.
You know, let me just get to know this person a little bit. And the next thing you know, we're talking and I'm taking notes or taking some photos. And, you know, that's really what it's about at the end of the day for me, is just to be able to meet someone and step into their lives for a second. Like I said, I'm always humbled. I'm always honored. And, you know, there's been a few times I go home and cry it out sometimes too, because the people you meet change your lives.
Yeah.
That's very true.
And that's a hard, you know, skill to have, to be able to earn that type of trust from people and have them open up to you and be vulnerable. So that's, you know, that's rare.
You have that ability. You've look at all the columns and articles you've written on behalf of Catholic Charities, or you've talked to people who have truly traumatic pasts.
Right. And that's like you just said, Jen. I mean, sometimes it's people at the darkest hours of their lives who you're talking to, and you know, people hear reporters, they picture like paparazzi's cameras. You see people looking at my camera and my notepad, and it's intimidating, but it really is an honor when people are willing to share, and when they do look at you as another human and kind of make that connection.
Yeah.
And it's an important role, too. Let's not undersell that. Famously, in your role, previous to you coming on board, Mary, the person we were talking about earlier, who was so beloved and everything, she went off to become an attorney. And now, I say this with love and affection, but that was the first time I ever felt, I feel like she's a traitor. Not to the diocese, not to Catholic Charities, but to the role of a communicator, the role of a journalist, the role of someone to tell stories, because we are loaded up with attorneys in the world, but we do not have...
And she's an outstanding one, by the way.
She is an outstanding one. God bless her, and I'm so happy that she's doing great.
A wonderful advocate, involved with the community.
I love her. She's wonderful in every way, shape, or form, even though she turned her back on her true calling.
Oh, my goodness.
But I would tell you that it's harder to find good communicators than it is to find good attorneys. And she was, and because it is a skill set, and what I do now, particularly since I haven't been a true journalist beyond my role here as the associate publisher in a long time, that muscle is quite weak for me now. I can't go into a room and interview someone and come up with a heart-tugging story like the two of you can, but because you both do it so regularly, have you found, Jen, over your career that your writing, I would have to assume this is true, your writing has gotten better, your interviewing skills have gotten better as you've done it longer?
I would certainly hope so.
Yeah. Do you remember those first couple of years? Can you think back to it and think of how raw you were back in the day?
Oh, absolutely. I remember, speaking about my college newspaper, I had written, I think, one of my very first articles. I think I actually have it framed in my house. My very first article ever printed, even it was for the college paper, and the editor I was speaking about, who I kind of looked up to, and one of the mentors. It was a question lead, like the very first sentence was a question, and he looked at me and he said, "You only get one question. One time a year do you get to write the first sentence as a question. Do you want this one to be it?" And I said, no, I don't. So, sometimes even to this day, I'll start a story with a question and then think to myself, I only get one a year still.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
I carry the lesson with you.
Yes.
Yep.
I do. I got that. Even though I didn't go to J school, but my first years, there were two things I was taught. Starting a story with a question and using the word imagine. If you start a story with the word imagine, I say, and I will say that, I did become a much better writer for all of my years as a journalist. Yeah. Not a great grammarian and not particularly good copy editor, but a very good writer.
Well, that's what I'm here for, Mike. I will diagram those sentences.
Do you know what's funny? I never learned how to diagram a sentence. So I went to Catholic school, and we had diagramming sentences part of the curriculum in 8th grade, but me and 3 friends were allowed to enter a contest to write a book It was a choose your own adventure book.
Oh, yeah.
And so during English class, we were allowed to leave English class and work on the book instead of whatever was going on in English class. And what was going on in English class during that time period was diagramming sentences, and I have never learned how to diagram a sentence.
I don't even know what that is, and I'm too scared.
That's because you're young and you didn't have to do it, probably.
I don't even think they do it in school anymore, do they?
I don't think so.
Well,
it requires lines, and you went off in all sorts of different directions. You had to write the words on top of the line, and depending on what the words were in that line, whether it was subjective or all sorts of different things, it would actually branch off. So you couldn't even read it as a line. You'd have to it was terrible.
I wish our listeners could see Mike's hand motions. Like, you need a big whiteboard in front of you.
You do. You do. You need a lot of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the math of grammar, because that's what it would look like a long division problem when you were finished.
To it.
The irony is, though, what I learned later on in life, particularly actually when I went for my public relations degree, is that I came to this realization that math and writing are actually very similar, that they are formulaic in the manner in which they work. And if you think of it in terms of that, it actually makes... I wish I had known that when I was trying to know how to do math, because I think it would have actually helped me with my terrible math skills. At any rate, I digress.
So, Jen.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, well, I was going to move forward a little bit. Because
me too.
Well, I think I should add something really quick as a disclaimer. After all of that talk about grammar, I have a feeling if there are grammar mistakes in the paper, I'm going to get letters now, because I just claim to be the guru of grammar. So I would like to maybe step that back a little bit.
Well, they're going to come from Pat Munyon, who's my mother-in-law, and never misses a mistake in the paper. So,
I look forward to it.
But I wanted to come back. So we talked a little bit. You started out in Texas for the college paper, and you move up to New York. Then you make it to the beautiful state, bucolic, gorgeous state of New Jersey. Thank you for coming here and understanding that, how wonderful our state is. But then in the middle of your career, you take a step across the pond and you end up in Germany. How does that happen?
I did, and it wasn't an easy decision, I have to say. I mean, well, maybe it was an easy decision, actually, but, I'd been a journalist at that point for 10 years, 11 years, and as I'm a military wife, so I had the opportunity to be deployed to Germany, and of course I wanted to go, but I had to give up my job for a year or two. It was a little scary, because I'm thinking how difficult will it be to get back in the journalism field.
Right.
But I'm glad I did it. Obviously, it was probably the best 2 years of my life. And until now.
Oh, of course, yes.
Coming to the Diocese of Camden.
Of course.
And I got to work on the Army base as well, doing some public relations.
Wow.
But that was mainly part-time so that I could travel as much as possible.
Yeah, that is the beauty. We've mentioned this before. My sister-in-law my brother-in-law is a Navy SEAL. And he was stationed in Germany for several years, and we got to visit. That was exactly what my sister-in-law did. They have 2 kids, so she chose to be a stay-at-home mom. But they would travel everywhere, every single place they could get to, and so easy to travel in Europe that they loved every second of it. And we did actually get to visit them in Germany once, and I came away realizing they were in the Black Forest area? Okay. I can't remember the name of the city. It's a major city. I should know it. It's going to annoy me that I can't remember it at the moment. But we got to visit them, and I've decided that area of Germany is perhaps my favorite place to be in the entire world.
Wow.
It was so beautiful. The people couldn't have been nicer. I traveled the Autobahn without any speed limits.
Oh, that's my bucket list.
Got up to 150 miles an hour in a Volvo. It was outstanding. In a Volvo.
Nice.
It's a nice Volvo.
Gosh.
I wanted to be safe. I was going to go 150 miles an hour. But yeah, it was a great experience. So I can imagine just how it must have felt living there. That's wonderful.
It was fantastic, and I was very blessed because we lived in a German town. We ended up renting an apartment from a German family who just took us in as their own family. I still speak to them almost every day now. And they helped me enroll me in a German class so that I could learn the language. And so I was going to be staying there. And I'm proud to say I learned German enough that I can, get around and even spell it even better. But what was funny is that no matter where I went, they would immediately know I was American, even though I'm trying to speak German, because I get the words right, but I put them in the wrong order because of the diagramming of the grammar.
There you go.
I I couldn't put the words in the different order that the Germans have it. So, they appreciated that I tried though, and then I would ask them, please switch back to German. I'm talking about like people in the and out in the markets, and so it was great. It was a great 2 years.
So that must have pushed you out of your comfort zone a little. Do you think that kind of helped you, coming back here after Germany, in terms of just like adaptability? I mean, that's a huge switch, and then it's like reverse culture shock and
yes, you
all
got
over
that
again.
Right. It was like going from living in a fishbowl to an aquarium or the ocean, and then back to the fishbowl a little bit for me.
I love that analogy.
But so yes, the transition to Germany took a while because of the language barrier, and I didn't know anybody. Thank goodness for that, the German family I spoke about. And then coming back, we thought, we got so used to traveling in Europe. Why did we not do this back in the States? And then we were like, that's right, because it's bigger.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
Can't just hop on a train to the next country.
Right.
It was Canada, I guess. But
hey, listen, I love traveling. I have not done a good enough job traveling in the United States. And the truth of the matter is, there is a big difference between New Jersey and Alabama. And one of these days, I'm going to figure out what it is.
South Jersey, and North Jersey.
That's true.
We
Also a big difference between the two of us.
True.
But I really do. That is one of my goals as I'm approaching my 50th year, is to travel in the United States a lot more as often as I can.
I agree with you. I mean, I have to say, actually, traveling abroad made me have a even more appreciation for America, because I realized how much I haven't seen in my own country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, I remember the town they lived in. They lived in Stuttgart.
Stuttgart.
I love Stuttgart.
I knew it would come back to you.
Well, it took a little while. It took surprisingly a long time to pull that name.
You're pushing 50.
I know, I'm getting older. You're not wrong, Mary. I am getting older. So you're back, and you're in Jersey again. And what do you do for work once you get back?
So at this point, I thought I will take a break. And I actually went to work for a bakery for a year.
Oh, I didn't know.
I'm so jealous.
Mike's going to start going on about food and his baking.
Dessert, breads, what were your cookies?
You name it. So I worked at the bakery. But oddly enough, the storytelling comes back in, because my very first day that I was left alone at the bakery, a woman came in, and she looked so excited to be there, and she was looking at all the different pastries, and I said, I was just like, well, what can I do to help? And then she said, I have to choose very carefully. This is the first sweets I've had in 2 years. I just found out I was cancer free, so I'm going to eat something with sugar. And from that story on, I mean, how do you immediately not cry? Obviously, yeah. So I mean, and then from there on, I realized, like you said, we were already saying, everybody has a story. Mm-hmm. I met one day I met a Holocaust survivor.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
We were talking, and he pulled up his sleeve and showed me the tattooed numbers on his arm. Wow. So. And then
I just got after
a while, I had to step away from the illustrious career of the bakery and return to real life. And to be honest, I could own a bakery. That was pretty exciting.
I'm a little jealous right now.
Yeah, it was pretty great. Yeah. And then I worked, and along the same lines, I guess, I went to work for a greeting card company.
I loved hearing about this. I was so did Kevin Hickey, my supervisor, who was fascinated by this.
I wasn't ready to go back to journalism yet, so I went to what can I do here? I'm going to write some greeting cards.
Mm-hmm. Hey, that flexes the creative muscle like anything else does.
It certainly does.
I often am angry at greeting cards. Usually, particularly anytime it's around my wife's birthday or it's the anniversary, because they're all so sappy and sugary. And I'm like, how come they never just say, honey, we made it through another year.
Whoa.
We're still alive. No, I'm serious.
That's where you write a handwritten card, Mike.
That's what I do. That's what I end up doing. But I'll go through all the lists of cards and go, they are so sappy. I can't give this to my very real world wife like myself. It's like we're very authentic in that. And I'm not going to get into
Jen, did you write sappy cards? Or
I did. I did write sappy cards, but I will be honest that I tried to put myself in the shoes of somebody buying the card. That was more like Mike, and not exactly
bitter and somewhat angry.
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. A little dead inside. No,
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
So
that comes in handy occasionally.
I tried to make some ones that were more real life, because not everybody wants flowy cards, and not everybody has great relationships with your parents and brothers and sisters and grandparents. So I would try to write ones that were a little bit more realistic.
My mom, growing up, always said it wasn't so much a 7-year itch thing, but she said every 7 years it was usually, and it was 7 years on the mark. That was always the year where it was a success that my mom and dad didn't kill each other. And those are the years I kind of have in mind when I think it's like I need something for that year. Okay, it's not been a great year. Give me the realistic card.
Well, Jen has an awesome sense of humor. So, did you include any punny ones in there?
Believe it or not, I was terrible at the funny cards, which was very disappointing since I find myself very funny anyway. At least,
as do I.
And so I was shocked that happened, and I was so disappointed in myself.
The puns didn't fly over too well.
I actually got one in. This is bad. This is how bad it is. I can't believe I'm going to say this. There were pieces of toast on the cover of the card, and it was like, a toast to your birthday or a toast to your anniversary, and somehow that got printed.
I love it.
I'm not proud of that.
Was that how it worked, by the way? You would get the image and then have to write the text with it?
They have this
I did not
talented artist. They would supply the art, and then you make the words to go with it. Yeah.
I like that.
See, there's a story behind everything. You look at greeting cards every day. Do you ever think about who's writing
Not
them and
once.
putting those messages together?
Well, no, I think about them a lot, but only around my anniversary and my bishop's. Yeah.
I think I still actually, I know I still have some that I wrote. I didn't give them away because
I love that.
I keep them. I should bring them in sometime and show you guys.
I love that.
Oh, that'd be great. So, you're a properly trained journalist, you're a world traveler, you're a baker, you're a
wordsmith.
A wordsmith that does greeting cards. How do you get into Catholic journalism?
Yes.
How does that jump happen? Because I know
my
how
question.
it happened for me. How did that? Now I was an avid reader of the Catholic Star Herald since I was a little boy. As a matter of fact, I'm happy to tell Carl Peters that I was reading his stuff while I was in high school, which I'm not sure he particularly appreciated, but it's true.
I bet he loves it.
So how do you make the jump into Catholic journalism?
I'll have to take a few steps back to get there. I had made my full confirmation, finished my sacraments as an adult, not as a child. So that was in 2004. Though I was baptized Catholic, I wasn't raised full-time in that faith. So as an adult, I was looking to strengthen that, finish my sacraments. And as the years evolved, I just realized how much I wanted to do something more than secular journalism or greeting cards. Sorry, Mary. I needed to go beyond the toast, is what I'm saying. And
I understand.
I was like, I love my faith. I'm learning more about my faith as an adult, and I love writing. What can I do? And I started looking around, and I was hired as a freelance writer for the Monitor magazine, at the time newspaper, for the Diocese of Trenton. So I started as a freelance writer there. And then their their associate editor left, and I applied and was hired, about a year later or so as a fellow associate editor, and then was advanced to managing editor eventually.
Wow.
How was that transition from, going to just writing to then managing?
It was, it was seamless.
Really?
I don't mean to, it wasn't all me either. I had had a great associate editor that really helped me even learn more about the church and the writings, the way things are worded in the church, and even more about the sacraments and special celebrations.
Yeah.
So the team there really helped me learn more about the church, and then I just got to combine my love of writing with my faith.
That's amazing.
One of the things that has always been meaningful to me now that I'm on that end of as a Catholic journalist is telling stories about our Catholic faith. Because the truth of the matter is there was a time when you would see Catholicism, for good reasons, in secular press on a more regular basis. Now, unfortunately, we tend to only see Catholicism when it's something negative, declining attendance, sex abuse crisis, our case, Chapter 11 at one point. But not a lot of the good news gets in there anymore. And so I really, when I came here, I was fixated, and that's kind of where this podcast came from too, fixated on making sure there was an outlet to tell really great stories about things that are going on in the Catholic Church. And I got the impression reading your stuff at the Monitor that you guys had a focus on that too, that there were all these great stories out there. Do you recall, like, the first time going out to cover a Catholic event? Because it is a little different than covering secular media.
Yes, it definitely is. Well, as a freelancer, before I was full-time hired at the Monitor, I was sent to an Three Kings event, the Epiphany, and it was for a predominantly Spanish-speaking community. And they welcomed me with open arms. First off, they were happy to see me, very different than secular press.
Yeah, right.
They were very happy to see me, so I was like, am I in the right place? And then they wanted to talk. They knew I was there for to report on the celebration, about what it meant to them, traditions, and they wanted to talk. And they wanted to feed me. There was tons of tamales, homemade tamales. But I agree with what you're saying, that it's different to report good news. And people say, oh, good news doesn't sell. That's what I hear all the time. Good news doesn't sell. You hear that from the secular world. But I say it does sell. People do want to hear good news. But Catholic media goes beyond good news. We're not there just to sugarcoat and tell good stories. I've told some really heartbreaking stories as well, and covering legislation in Trenton. I met some amazing people who were against the right to die bill because they were afraid for themselves, because they had diseases, and they were afraid that the insurance companies wouldn't pay for their medication to help them keep living. That's it's not a good story. That's a real story. That affects all of our lives. So I think that combining, J school with faith, I'm just really honored to do that, because I feel like I'm finally in where I'm supposed to be.
That I completely agree with. I bounced around, much like yourself, to a lot of different jobs before I came here. And I've said this on the podcast before, this is the best job I've ever had. It's been the most stressful. It's required the longest hours. It's put me in contact with people who really don't like the Catholic Church or me for that matter. And yet I still find it to be the most rewarding experience I've ever had, because I get to interact with people who, well, they're so much better than me, are so genuine in their love of the faith and their love of their communities and their love of the people. And it's, I will often remark that if I'm having a bad day, I walk over to Catholic Charities, because the work they're doing there is just so amazing, and the people who are doing it are so awe-inspiring that I can't help but feel better about the world we live in, because here are all these Catholics, or for that matter, in Catholic Charities standpoint, not necessarily a whole bunch of Catholics, but Catholics who are living the Catholic faith publicly and comfortably and fearlessly, and it does a lot.
Yeah.
It does a lot. And to your point, you're absolutely right. I've learned more about the Catholic faith in the last 6 years than ever I could have learned before. Like, why things happen, how things happen, from a traditional sense, from a Vatican administrative sense. It's a great experience to really actually understand what your faith,
absolutely,
the nuggets of your faith,
and especially in a place like New Jersey, where it's just so densely populated. I mean, our diocese, the 6 southern counties, they're so diverse in landscape, population, people kind of all over the Catholic spectrum, for lack of a better word.
That's absolutely true. There is Catholicism is unique in the sense that many other faiths, because of the nature of their faiths, they're very homogeneous, whereas the Catholic faith is actually quite heterogeneous.
Yeah.
In many ways, it very much emulates the American population. You got half of it. Well, you got 35% of it very progressive. You got 35% of it very conservative, and then you got this moderate middle in the middle, who and everyone is just trying to figure out what's best and how to live the way Christ intended us to. And that's where it kind of comes on us as journalists to put out these stories, to showcase what's going on. I've always found it that this podcast and the newspaper should be inspirational and aspirational. I hope people read what we put out and say, wow, that's awesome. I want to try something like that at my parish. Or, oh my goodness, what a great story. It makes me feel so good to be a Catholic that I just saw that story. And you two do phenomenal work at making that happen.
Oh, well, thank you.
You do. You really do. Listen, I'm no fool. I know who to bring in when we need good talent. I may have many, many flaws, but one of them is not knowing who has good talent.
And there are, like you said, Jen, there's the difficult stories that need to be covered because they're real. There's the uplifting one. There's the ones that, some of the people who contribute or send in articles, and I read it, and I'm like, I had no idea that was even part of our faith or of Catholic social teaching. You have people like Mike Canaris who kind of really dissect these really complicated topics, and it's just, you just never stop learning.
Yeah.
We should also give a little shout out. Mike Canaris has a article in the paper this week about the restrictions on the Latin Mass, and I believe he's going to be our next guest on the podcast.
Oh, nice.
Of which it will
Love
be
him.
Jen's first time as my co-host for that podcast, as a matter of fact.
It's Jen's first time of hearing this.
Yeah.
Well,
Day at first.
The look she just had.
Mary's going to be on vacation, so my guest, possible future co-host, will be Jen Mauro. So thank you, Jen, for agreeing to do this.
Whatever I can do.
Second time being voluntold to do something on a podcast, Mike.
Listen,
Jeez.
I told you I really know talent. I don't necessarily know great professional habits, but when it comes to knowing who's the perfect person to put in the place, it's great. Actually, I feel bad for Mary, because Mary loves talking to Mike Canaris, because his writing, for anyone who's not familiar with Mike Canaris, our columnist, I guess you could say he's kind of like the Vatican beat. He really talks about sort of helping us to understand why certain decisions are made in the Vatican, or how they might interact with us, or the background of Pope Francis as to why he makes the decisions that he makes, or greenlights the decisions that are greenlit. So Mike is a great person. He's a professor at Loyola.
He's extraordinarily well-read and smart, and smarter than I'll ever be in 18 lifetimes, but he has a way of explaining things in a way that's humble, and I don't feel too dumb around him.
I don't know. I feel pretty dumb around him, but he does a great job of making it.
But he doesn't make you feel that way. We make ourselves feel that way.
That's a good point. It's an excellent point, Mary. But yeah, so there's that to look forward to next week. So for your first month of being at the Catholic Star Herald, having left the wonderful Trenton Monitor, which I can't say enough great things about, that's a wonderful magazine. It was a newspaper, now a magazine, and it's a beautiful piece.
It has always been on your desk whenever I've come up here.
I have always watched it, and I apologize to the people of Trenton, because I saw a lot of talent in Jen, and I was like, if she's available, I would really like her to come work for us. And that's what happened.
We are lucky.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Yeah, it's okay.
There's a lot of hardworking people there that put that magazine out, and I think it looks beautiful.
It does.
But go ahead.
No, even I think the last edition went out without you. I have to say they did a great job there, and it's a beautiful piece. So if you haven't been if you're in the dioceses of New Jersey and you haven't been reading the Catholic publications for your diocese, please do so. They're actually all really, really good. But the Monitors, I will say, is probably the best looking one. That magazine style really jumps out at you. So it's a good looking piece.
Thanks.
So, you're welcome.
I agree, though. It is. I love speaking with the other counterparts, Catholic journalists in this state.
Yeah.
I know at least 3 of them, and everybody works so hard, and we always can share ideas, and that's important too. We're not islands. It's good, to bounce ideas off of each other and talk about the different dioceses. Yeah,
and let's face it, each of our dioceses and this goes for every diocese of the country, they're all a little unique. We all have different focuses. They all take on they just by the nature of things, they tend to take on the personality of their bishop, and they change over time. What the diocese is now is a little different than it was when Bishop McHugh was here in the mid-'90s, and Archbishop Damiano way back in the 50s, I think. And they change. So, but that's why the publications are so important, because regardless of the change in bishop, the paper, whether it's online, magazine, newspaper, is still the mouthpiece of the diocese. Bishop Sullivan, anytime he's going to be putting out a decree of some kind, he keeps the Catholic Star Herald in mind as he's doing it. He knows every date that were published. We line things up so that if something's announced, it'll go out as soon as in the very next edition of the paper. And oftentimes online even before that. But it's your local Catholic newspapers are incredibly important, and particularly in a world now, in the secular world we live in, where Catholicism has been, in many journalists' mind, relegated to the back burner. In Catholic publications, it is very much at the front. It's all we focus on. Matter of fact, we don't focus on anything else. Occasionally, we'll get some high school sports in there from time to time, but and we'll certainly cover pop culture. That was one thing that Carl was great at in his writings, was finding these unique intersections of Catholicism, Christianity, and pop culture. But the truth of the matter is, it's all about spreading God's message.
Right.
Yep. And the work being done in the diocese.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I just realized we need a Jennifer Mauro part 2, because I have like 6 more questions written down that we didn't get to.
We got 4 minutes. We got. What's one of them that we didn't get to that you want to know about?
So for listeners who might not know, and I don't really know the half of it, what does an average day look like for you as a managing editor, or is there no average day?
Oh, geez, that is a question. That's the one. That's the
how
question
you end
that
with
you
4
went
minutes to go. You want to ask that?
The other one was, what's your favorite part of this type of work? What's the most challenging? I have a million questions.
Wow, there is a lot. I'm going to answer that one because it's
Okay,
shorter.
go ahead.
How is that?
Perfect.
I think we all know that at this point that my favorite part of this job is writing and meeting people.
Sure.
One of the most challenging is reaching all of the parishes that we have in our diocese. So I highly encourage and ask that if there are parishes out there, faithful out there, youth groups, senior groups, whatever it is, and you have story ideas for us, please contact me at the Catholic Star Herald and let me know, because we're looking for those stories. And I hope to go out and start meeting more of our priests and our faithful and just to say hi and introduce myself, get my face out there. But please feel free to contact me first, because we want to tell your stories. We want to know what's going on in your communities.
Mm-hmm.
And you seem like somebody who really wants to be out there, like you said, meet face to face, make the connections.
I do. I mean, there's just so many great people out there to meet, and I really, really enjoy also working with the schools and the youth ministries, because our Catholic young people have a lot to offer. There's a lot of good writers out there, a lot of good podcasters, I'm sure, photographers.
Absolutely.
I want to hear from you. I want to see what you guys are doing.
Yeah. I can't wait till there's a Catholic Star Herald TikTok account. I think that's up next.
Oh
So
my
we're gonna have
gosh,
to work
do
on
not
that
put me in charge of that.
I'm on it.
you're gonna-
Jen's
I'm
got
on
it.
Yeah.
You're in charge of the Catholic Charities TikTok account. Don't worry about it.
You know what? I started one for my dog, and I gave up after like a month.
It is a lot of work. People
I
don't realize
know.
that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But no, I for one am very happy that Jen is here. Number one, I know it was somebody I targeted early on, but I got to meet Jen at several different opportunities over the last 5 years, and she really impressed me with her enthusiasm. Number one, and then her willingness to she asks a lot of questions, which is a little annoying because I hate to talk. But she would ask me all these questions. I'm like, who is this woman? What the heck? But then I started thinking about it, and I started following the monitor a little bit more. And I was like, wow, you know what? She has some skill sets. I'm like, that might be an interesting idea, knowing that, Carl was getting older, and at some point he might want to retire. So I don't know. Did I do okay, Mary? Have you been happy with Jen for the last month?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm not just saying that because you're here, Jen. I swear, I've told Mike many times. After I first met you in the elevator, I said to Mike, she just has a way about her. Like, I still get nervous talking to people. We went over that earlier, but I said I don't feel nervous, talking to her.
Because she doesn't let you know.
She's
Mary.
funny and like has that Jersey sarcasm with the mix of the Texas humor too.
I'm not sure what's what. Which one's the sarcasm? The Texas?
Well, it's great either way.
Thank you. So I now I have to know, do I ask too many questions? Obviously, I ask a lot of questions.
That's okay. Keep up
that's
the
a
good
good
work.
thing.
I want you to keep doing that.
Actually, I do ask
There
a
are
lot of
stories
questions.
everywhere. Everyone has a story, Mike. You
That's
gotta
absolutely
remember
right.
that.
Well,
Including
listeners,
you.
I hope you will all check out Jen's stuff at the CatholicStarHerald.org. That's CatholicStarHerald.org. Her contact information is up there. By all means, you can reach out to her with story ideas as well. Thank you very much for listening, Jen. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being my future co-host.
Yes, thank
Mary,
you.
thank you for being here and asking such great questions. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in and checking us out. And we'll be back next week. Talk to you later, everybody. Bye.